Morning light spilled across the marble floor, soft and deliberate, catching the edges of glass and silver. Outside the walls of glass, the ocean shimmered faintly beyond the cliffside. Inside, everything smelled of wealth and lemon polish. Ethan sat alone at the long breakfast table, scrolling through news on his tablet. The soft clink of a spoon against porcelain was the only sound until footsteps, small, hesitant, echoed from the hallway. A girl appeared in the doorway, small in her oversized pink hoodie. Her hair was pulled into uneven puffs, eyes quiet but sharp, the kind that watched everything. She stood still for a moment, not sure if she was allowed to enter. He looked up and smiled, the polite kind of smile adults offer children they barely know. "Morning," he said. "You're up early." She nodded but didn't move closer. Her gaze shifted to the table, to the crystal glass of orange juice that gleamed like liquid sunlight beside his plate. He noticed the focus of her stare and chuckled softly. "You want some? I'll pour you a glass." She shook her head. Then her voice came, almost a whisper. "Don't drink that." The air seemed to pause around them. He blinked, the faint smile freezing on his lips. "What?" Her eyes stayed on the glass. "It's not just juice." For a moment he thought he'd misheard her. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind him, the sound of waves far below the cliffs. He set the tablet down and leaned back slightly. "Why would you say that?" "I saw her mix something in it." He followed the direction of her gaze toward the kitchen. Vanessa's voice floated from there, humming to music he couldn't hear. Her tone was light, careless, everything about her morning perfect. He frowned slightly. Maybe she added vitamins. She's been on a health kick lately. The girl didn't answer. She just folded her arms, the sleeves of the hoodie covering her small hands. Her next words came out soft but certain. "It smells like that stuff they used on us." He blinked again. "Used on you?" "At the center," she said. "When they didn't want us to remember things." Something cold flickered in his chest. He looked at the juice, so ordinary, so harmless. A thin trail of condensation slid down the side of the glass, catching the light. He reached out, touched the base. Cold. Real. Footsteps clicked from the kitchen, heels on tile. Vanessa appeared with her usual brightness, silk blouse, loose hair, and a confidence that seemed to command the air. "There's my two favorite people," she said cheerfully. "Breakfast is ready. Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" The girl gave a small nod but didn't meet her eyes. Ethan cleared his throat. "This juice, did you add something?" Vanessa laughed, a light and practiced sound. "Of course. Fresh turmeric. It's anti-inflammatory. Don't tell me you've started doubting my wellness routine." He tried to laugh with her but it came out thin. "Right. Turmeric." She leaned down, kissed the top of his head, the scent of her perfume faint and precise. "Drink up, darling," she said, still smiling. "You'll need your energy today." Then she walked out toward the terrace, phone already in hand. The silence that followed felt heavy. He turned back to the girl. "You don't like her juice?" She shook her head. "I don't like people who smile when they lie." He wanted to correct her, to tell her not to say things like that, but the words stayed stuck in his throat. She took a step back toward the doorway, her sneakers squeaking against marble. "Just don't drink it," she said softly. "Not yet." Then she was gone, leaving the faint echo of her steps behind. He looked again at the glass. Sunlight cut across it, bright and harmless, yet something about it unsettled him. He lifted it halfway, hesitated, then lowered it slowly. After a long moment he stood, carried the glass to the sink, and poured the juice away. The orange stream twisted down the drain, leaving only a faint ring on the steel. Through the window he saw Vanessa outside, walking across the garden, talking into her phone, her smile still in place. Always smiling. He rinsed the glass twice, set it upside down on the rack, and stared at his reflection in the faucet, distorted, doubled, uncertain. For a moment he thought he heard the girl's whisper again, as if it lingered in the quiet air. He turned toward the hallway. "Zara," he called. No answer. Only the ocean, distant and slow, and the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. He looked once more at the empty glass in the sink. The last drop slid toward the drain and disappeared. Something inside him shifted, small, almost imperceptible, but real. The kind of feeling that doesn't let a man go back to sleep. He stood there for a long time, sunlight flickering over marble and chrome, realizing he no longer trusted the calm he'd built his life around. The morning moved on, pretending nothing had happened. Outside, the ocean breathed against the cliffs. Inside, the house kept its rhythm, the whir of the espresso machine, the steady sweep of sunlight across the polished floor. Everything looked normal, but the air had changed. It carried a quiet tension that clung to the walls. Ethan tried to focus on the tablet in his hands. Stock reports scrolled past unread. He kept glancing at the sink where the empty glass sat upside down, a faint ring of orange still visible inside the drain. He rubbed his temple once, twice, then locked the screen and stood. In the kitchen, Vanessa's voice floated between laughter and instruction as she spoke on the phone. Her tone was light, her reflection in the glass cabinet perfect, smooth hair, immaculate posture, a woman so used to control she made control look like charm. When she noticed him standing there, she smiled as though nothing about the morning could have been out of place. "You didn't finish breakfast," she said, ending her call. "Are we fasting now?" He forced a faint smile. "I wasn't hungry." "You're never hungry when something's on your mind." She reached for another glass, poured juice from the same pitcher, and slid it toward him across the counter. The scent of citrus filled the air again. "You'll feel better after you drink." He looked at the glass but didn't touch it. "You know me. I like my coffee." Her eyes flicked to the untouched cup by the sink, then back to him. She laughed softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Coffee's overrated. Try to be open to the new, darling." She turned away before he could answer. The movement of her shoulders, graceful, precise, made something twist uneasily in his stomach. He left the kitchen and crossed the hallway to his study. The moment the door closed, he exhaled. He didn't like the way her voice had sounded when she said open to the new, too careful, too measured, like the words had already been rehearsed. He sat at his desk and stared at the surveillance panel built into the wall. Four tiny screens displayed different angles of the estate, the main gate, the pool, the living room, the back garden. All still. All normal. He switched to the kitchen feed. Vanessa moved around the counter, phone pressed to her ear again, still smiling. He turned off the screen. Through the open window came the faint laughter of the girl somewhere outside. Zara's voice, light, cautious, threaded with the sound of a skipping rope hitting stone. For a moment he considered calling her back inside, asking her to explain what she meant earlier. But he didn't. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear more. The rest of the day unfolded like a performance. At noon, his driver brought the car around for a meeting downtown. Vanessa kissed his cheek before he left, and he forced himself to return the gesture. Her perfume lingered after she stepped back, sharp, floral, expensive. As he walked away, she called after him, "Text me when you get there." He nodded but didn't reply. Downtown traffic and business talk should have distracted him, but every detail felt distant. He caught himself glancing at glasses of juice served during lunch, at the color of them, at how easily someone could slip something invisible into something ordinary. By late afternoon, the mansion greeted him with the same false peace. The staff moved quietly. Vanessa was in the garden arranging flowers for the gala, humming again. Zara sat at the edge of the fountain, drawing in a small notebook, her knees pulled close to her chest. He walked over slowly. She noticed him and froze, pencil hovering above the page. "You like drawing?" he asked. She shrugged. "It helps me remember what I see." He nodded toward the sketchbook. "What are you drawing now?" "The window," she said after a pause. "And what's behind it?" He looked down and saw a careful pencil outline of the breakfast room, the table, the tall glass, even the sunlight streaking across the floor. But in her drawing, there was also a shadow behind the curtain. A shape that shouldn't have been there. He felt a chill. "You saw that this morning?" She didn't answer. She only turned the page to a new sheet and began another sketch, smaller this time, a hand pouring something from a small brown vial into a glass. He crouched to her level. "Zara," he said quietly, "how long have you been here?" "2 days. "And before that?" "Another house," she said. "They moved me again." "Who's they?" "The charity lady," she said. "The one that works for her." Her pencil paused. She looked up, eyes suddenly serious. "You believe me now?" He didn't answer. The garden felt too open, the house too full of windows. A soft vibration came from his pocket, Vanessa's message. "Dinner at 7. Don't be late, love." A heart emoji followed it. He looked toward the terrace where she was still arranging flowers, sunlight glinting off her bracelet. Everything about her radiated calm efficiency, as if the world existed exactly as she wanted it to. He said quietly, "Come inside before it gets cold." Zara gathered her notebook and followed him toward the house. Inside, the air conditioning whispered through vents, spreading a cool that didn't reach his skin. She disappeared up the staircase toward the guest rooms, leaving faint echoes of her sneakers on the steps. He stopped by the kitchen again. The pitcher of juice was still there, half full. He poured a small amount into a glass, watching how it caught the light, the way tiny bubbles clung to the rim. He sniffed it, searching for something, anything, out of place. Just orange, just sweet. Still, he poured it down the sink. When Vanessa entered moments later, her voice carried that soft amusement that always sounded like a test. "You're wasting the good stuff again." "I like it fresh," he said. "I just made it this morning." "I know." She studied him for a beat too long, then smiled, as if she'd won an invisible argument. "Dinner at 7, she repeated. "And try to relax. You look like you haven't slept." After she left, he stood there in the kitchen alone, the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock filling the silence. Through the window, the ocean glowed silver under the setting sun. He wondered why the simplest words from a child could unbalance an entire day. As night crept over the estate, the house lights dimmed automatically. He poured himself coffee and walked through the quiet halls. Every surface reflected him in fragments, distorted, stretched, repeated until he couldn't tell which image was real. Later, lying in bed beside Vanessa, he stared at the ceiling while she scrolled on her phone. She reached over, brushed her fingers across his arm. "You're miles away again," she murmured. "Just tired. You should drink your juice in the morning. It'll help." He looked toward the darkness beyond the window, then back at her. She smiled without looking up from her screen. He turned onto his side, eyes open to the faint shimmer of city lights far below the cliffs. The girl's voice returned in his head, soft, steady, impossible to forget. "Don't drink that. It's not just juice." He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. The next morning began with fog rolling off the ocean, soft and pale, wrapping the cliffs in a gray hush. The mansion felt different under the muted light, less like a home and more like a museum built to display perfection. Ethan came down to the library with a cup of coffee in one hand and a half-formed headache behind his eyes. The house was silent except for the low hum of the smart ventilation system and the faint tapping of rain against the tall windows. Zara was already there, curled up in one of the leather chairs, her knees tucked beneath her hoodie. A notebook rested on her lap, filled with lines and shapes that looked more like circuit diagrams than drawings. She didn't look up when he entered. "You're up early again," he said, keeping his tone light. She nodded, still sketching. He sat across from her, pretending to scroll through messages on his phone, but his attention kept drifting to the faint scratching of her pencil. "You like it here?" he asked. "I guess," she said after a moment. "It's quiet." "That's good, right?" "It's quiet in a way that listens." He looked up. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, eyes still down. "Sometimes the walls hear things." He frowned, trying to follow her. "You mean like echoes?" "No," she met his gaze. "Like microphones." The word hung in the air. He tried to laugh. "That's a big idea for someone your age." She didn't smile. They had them at the center too. Hidden in smoke alarms, lamps, clocks. Ethan leaned back, uneasy. "You think someone's listening here?" "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." She flipped to a fresh page and started drawing again. It was a simple sketch, Vanessa standing by the kitchen counter, holding a glass bottle. The lines were rough, but the shape of the small brown veil was clear. He studied it, trying to ignore the unease creeping through him. "When did you see this?" "Yesterday morning," she said. "Before you came down." He rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Zara, are you sure?" "Vanessa, she wouldn't." She put the bottle back in the drawer near the sink, the girl said quietly. "Second one from the right. Under the towels." He hesitated. "You watched her?" "I couldn't sleep," she said simply. "I got thirsty." He sat there for a moment, unsure whether to call it paranoia or intuition. Finally, he stood. "Stay here," he said. The kitchen was empty when he entered. The morning fog pressed against the windows, dulling the light. He opened the drawer she'd mentioned. The towels were neatly folded, the scent of lemon detergent sharp and clean. Beneath them, tucked at the back, was a small amber bottle. No label. He held it up to the light. Something viscous clung to the inside. Not juice. Not turmeric. For a long second, he didn't move. Then he heard footsteps. He slid the bottle back under the towels and closed the drawer just as Vanessa entered, holding her phone in one hand and a smile in the other. "There you are," she said. "You vanished after breakfast yesterday." "I had calls," he replied. "You always do." She moved closer, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "You should take a day off. You look like you're living inside your head." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." She tilted her head, studying him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he said too quickly. She held his gaze for a moment, then smiled again. "I'm hosting a small dinner tomorrow, just a few investors and friends. You'll be there, of course." "Of course." "Good." She kissed his cheek, her perfume curling through the air, and left the room. The moment she was gone, he leaned against the counter, breathing slowly. His reflection stared back from the microwave door, calm on the surface, chaos underneath. When he returned to the library, Zara hadn't moved. She looked up, studying his face. "You found it." He sat down across from her. "What makes you think that?" "Because you look different," she said. "Like someone who's trying not to show he's scared." He looked at the sketchbook again. "Where did you learn to notice things like that?" She shrugged. "You learn fast when no one believes you." He closed his eyes briefly. "What do you think she's doing?" Zara hesitated. "I think she's trying to keep you quiet." He frowned. "Quiet about what?" "I don't know," she said. "But she talks to people when you're asleep. She whispers sometimes. In the phone." He opened his mouth to ask more, but a sharp ping from his tablet interrupted. A message flashed across the screen. Security system, 1 camera offline, kitchen, 2:03 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. He stared at the time stamp. Exactly when Zara said she'd been awake. When he looked back up, she was watching him, eyes steady. "Do you believe me now?" He didn't answer. He wasn't sure what he believed. That evening, he poured himself a drink, scotch this time, not juice, and sat in the dim light of his office. The hum of the sea was faint beyond the windows, the kind of sound that feels endless. He replayed the events in his mind, every detail precise, the whisper, the glass, the drawer, the missing footage. A small sound broke the silence, the house's smart system clicking as it recalibrated. He opened the surveillance feed again. The kitchen view flickered, then cleared. Empty. Perfectly normal. But as he scrubbed backward through the timeline, there it was, a gap, a void of static for 3 hours, then a flicker of movement. A shadow. Someone walking past the counter with a small bottle in hand. He leaned forward, heart tightening. The figure was unmistakable. Vanessa. The feed cut out again before showing more. When the screen went dark, his reflection stared back at him from the black glass, eyes wide, expression caught somewhere between disbelief and quiet fury. He sat back slowly, every breath measured. Somewhere down the hall, he heard Zara's voice, soft, humming a tune he didn't recognize. It calmed him just enough to think. He tapped the control panel and locked the file into a hidden folder. Then he whispered into the empty room, "What are you doing, Vanessa?" No one answered. Only the sea outside, moving against the rocks like it had forever. He turned off the lights, but sleep didn't come that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faint outline of her hand holding that bottle, the shimmer of orange liquid swirling inside. And somewhere, faint but clear, he kept hearing the girl's voice repeating in his head. "It's not just juice." The following day dawned brighter, a sharp contrast to the gray calm that had wrapped the estate the day before. Sunlight poured through glass walls, chasing the shadows across polished floors, but the brightness only made Ethan more aware of what hid beneath it. The house was too clean, too quiet. Every sound felt staged. He woke early, long before Vanessa, and moved through the halls in silence. The security room sat tucked behind a sliding panel near his study, small, sleek, filled with screens that watched every inch of his property. He keyed in his passcode and waited for the monitors to flicker to life. Every room looked untouched. The pool shimmered. The garden swayed with slow wind. The kitchen camera showed nothing but sunlight spilling across marble and steel. Still, a faint tremor of unease settled in his chest. He remembered the gap from the night before, the 3 missing hours of footage, and opened the system log. The same thing had happened again. Between 2 and 4 in the morning, one of the kitchen feeds had gone dark. He leaned closer, scrolling through the data, searching for any sign of power fluctuation. Nothing. No outage. No glitch. Just silence. Something, or someone, had manually turned it off. Behind him, a small voice said, "You're looking in the wrong folder." He spun. Zara stood in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, clutching a stuffed bear she pretended she didn't need anymore. She stepped inside, unafraid of all the screens. "How did you get in here?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "You left the door open." He sighed. "You shouldn't be here." She ignored that and pointed to the keyboard. Sometimes cameras save backup files even when they're turned off. They hide in the cache. Try there. He frowned at her certainty. "Where did you learn that?" "At one of the houses," she said simply. "They watched everything. I learned to see what they didn't want me to." Reluctantly, he followed her suggestion, typing a series of commands. A list of archived data appeared, a line of unlabeled clips. He clicked one at random. The feed opened to static, then steadied. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. The kitchen lights were low. A figure moved past the counter, pale robe trailing, hair falling loose. Vanessa. She carried the same brown bottle, poured a few drops into a glass, and stirred until the liquid shimmered. Ethan felt his pulse in his throat. He watched her glance around, expression calm, then lift her phone and whisper something into it before leaving the frame. The clip ended. He stared at the frozen image of her back turned to the camera. Zara spoke first. "Now you believe me." He nodded once, slowly. "What is she giving me?" he muttered. Zara hugged the bear closer. "Maybe something to make you quiet. Or to make you forget." He looked at her, startled. "Why would she want that?" "Because you know something," the girl said. "Even if you don't remember, you do." He wanted to dismiss her, but her words slid under his skin like a splinter he couldn't pull out. He saved the clip, encrypted it, and shut off the screens. "You can't tell anyone about this," he said. "Not yet." She nodded. "Okay. But she knows we know now." The simplicity of that sentence chilled him more than the evidence. He turned toward the window where the morning light was breaking through the mist, gilding everything in deceptive warmth. She knows we know. That thought stayed with him the rest of the day. He pretended to work from his office while Vanessa moved gracefully through the house, planning her dinner, making calls, speaking with decorators. She smiled at him every time their eyes met, but there was something behind her smile now, an awareness, a silent challenge. She knew. By late afternoon, he couldn't stay still. He needed to see more. He excused himself from a video call, went downstairs, and checked every room one by one, living room, guest hallway, music room. All pristine. All sterile. But when he reached Vanessa's study, he stopped. The door was closed. It rarely was. He listened first, nothing but faint classical music playing from her tablet. He turned the handle and stepped inside. The scent of jasmine and fresh ink filled the air. On the desk lay a neat spread of documents, a stack of invitations for her gala dinner, her phone charger, a decorative vase filled with pale roses. He turned the vase slightly, and something metallic clinked inside. Frowning, he reached in and felt the edge of something small, smooth, unfamiliar. When he lifted it into the light, his breath caught. A listening device. No bigger than a coin, matte black, its tiny light blinking faintly. He turned it over in his hand, heart hammering. There was no logo, no brand, nothing that should be inside his house without his knowledge. He placed it on the desk, staring at it. The question hit him hard, who was she talking to? And worse, how long had they been listening? Footsteps sounded down the hall. He shoved the device into his pocket, replaced the vase, and stepped back just as the door opened. Vanessa appeared, elegant as ever, phone still in her hand. "You're in my study," she said lightly, but the curve of her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Looking for you," he said. "Didn't mean to intrude." Her gaze drifted across the room, resting briefly on the vase, then returning to him. "You never have to knock," she said, walking past him to the desk. "You've been tense lately." "Something wrong?" "Just work." She brushed a hand along his sleeve. "You could always talk to me, you know." "I know." "Good." Her tone softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Don't forget about tonight. I want everything perfect." "I won't." As he turned to leave, she called after him, still smiling. "And Ethan?" He stopped. "Try to relax. You worry too much." He nodded without turning back. "I'll work on that." Outside the study, he walked fast, pulse quick. He didn't stop until he reached the far end of the corridor. Only then did he pull the device from his pocket. He wanted to crush it, to throw it into the sea below, but something told him to keep it. Evidence mattered now. That evening, he met Zara again in the library. She sat cross-legged on the carpet, the bear beside her, sketching the outline of a vase. He placed the bug on the table in front of her. "You were right," he said. She looked up. "I know." He sat beside her. "There may be more." She nodded toward the ceiling vents. "There always are." They searched for hours once the house quieted. The girl's instincts were uncanny, checking lamp bases, clock frames, even the hollow base of a sculpture in the hall. By midnight they had found 2 more devices, both hidden too neatly to be accidents. Ethan lined them up on the table. The faint red lights blinked in unison, as though mocking him. He looked at the girl. "I think she's working with someone." "Someone close," Zara said. He considered the board, his company, the projects she'd recently asked him about. She'd always seemed so curious about the new encryption software, about access codes. He'd thought it was interest. Affection. But now it looked like surveillance. He took a deep breath. "We can't let her know we found these." Zara tilted her head. "So what do we do?" "We listen back," he said. He plugged one of the devices into his laptop with an adapter and played the last recorded file. The first few seconds were static, then Vanessa's voice, calm, low, deliberate. "No, he doesn't suspect yet. But the launch details are stored in his private server. Once I have the passkey, we can move." Ethan froze. Another voice, male, distant, answered through the interference. "You're sure he'll give it to you?" "He trusts me," Vanessa said. "Or he used to." The clip ended there. Ethan leaned back, jaw clenched. The air around him felt heavier. Zara whispered, "She's selling your secrets." He nodded slowly. "And maybe more than that." He sat in silence for a long time, the weight of betrayal sinking in. Finally he spoke. "Tomorrow, I'll act like nothing's wrong. But we're going to turn this around." The girl watched him carefully. "How?" He looked at the blinking devices. "We set a trap." She didn't smile, but there was something steady in her gaze, trust, maybe, or the first glimmer of belief that he could be the kind of adult worth trusting. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and rain through the open window. The mansion stood bright and still against the dark, every light carefully arranged, every shadow hiding something. Inside, a man and a child sat quietly at a table surrounded by proof of betrayal, their world rearranging itself in silence. Ethan gathered the devices, locked them in a drawer, and turned off the lamp. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow everything changes." As the room sank into darkness, Zara's whisper came through the quiet like a reminder, the same one that had started everything. "Don't drink that," she murmured. He almost smiled. "I won't," he said. Then he switched off the final light. Morning arrived sharp and clear, the kind of day that pretends nothing could ever go wrong. The house gleamed again, washed in sunlight and silence, but Ethan no longer saw beauty in it. Every reflection felt like an eye, every polished surface hid the possibility of another lens. He met the girl in the library after breakfast. Vanessa had already left for a meeting downtown, leaving behind her usual trail of perfume and order. Zara sat at the long table with a bowl of cereal she wasn't eating, watching the light shift across the walls. He closed the door. "We can't let her know what we found." The girl nodded once, calm as always. "She already feels it." "What do you mean?" "When people lie," she said, "they start checking if you're still listening." He thought of Vanessa's gaze the night before, the way she'd looked at him too long, as if measuring his silence. He sat down across from the girl. "Then we have to stay quiet and act first." She tilted her head. "How?" He hesitated. Strategy had always come easy in business, buyouts, negotiations, numbers. But this was personal. Still, the logic of survival felt the same. First, he said, we make her believe nothing's changed. We keep talking like before. We eat, we smile, we pretend. Meanwhile, we find out who she's talking to. She uses her phone, Zara said. And my house phones, he added. She could be routing calls through the home network. The girl traced a finger along the table. Can you track them? I built half the system, he said. Yes. He opened his laptop, fingers steady but fast. She moved closer, curious, watching the code scroll across the screen. He pulled up the network logs and isolated the encrypted calls. 2 numbers repeated, one local, one international, both masked through proxy routes. He flagged them for recording. Zara leaned in. What are you going to do? Give her something to steal, he said. She frowned. A lie. A bait. He smiled faintly. That's how you catch people who are sure they're smarter than you. He spent the next hour crafting a fake project file, a convincing set of documents detailing a non-existent software launch, complete with false prototypes and internal memos. It was real enough to tempt anyone watching from the shadows. Zara watched silently, occasionally glancing toward the hallway as if expecting Vanessa to appear. When he finished, he turned the screen toward her. This, he said, is what she'll think I'm protecting. The girl studied the page, brow furrowed. What if she finds out it's fake? She won't, not until I want her to. He sent the file to a decoy drive, one he knew Vanessa could access from her personal laptop. Then he wiped his fingerprints off the keyboard and sat back. The faint hum of the computer filled the room like breathing. Zara looked at him thoughtfully. You're not angry. I am, he said. But anger's useless until it's quiet. She seemed to understand that. What happens after she takes it? Then we trace where it goes. A knock came from the doorway. Mrs. Delaney, the housekeeper, peeked in. Lunch is ready, sir, she said, then paused when she noticed Zara. You've got company. He smiled politely. She's helping me with something. The woman nodded, though her eyes lingered a second longer than usual. All right then. When she left, Zara whispered, she knows too. About what? About her. The girl's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. She looks at her like people look at storms. He didn't answer, but the words stayed with him. By evening, the house had settled into its usual rhythm, music from the kitchen, faint laughter from Vanessa's calls, the scent of dinner warming in the air. Ethan played his part, moving through conversations like a man half asleep. He complimented the food, discussed the gala, even laughed when she teased him for his tech obsession. All while watching her fingers on the phone, the angle of her glances toward his study. Later, when she stepped out to take another call, he slipped quietly to the control room. The monitor showed an active transmission from her device, data uploading through the encrypted network. She'd taken the bait. He traced the route in real time. Her phone cloud relay unknown server registered overseas. He initiated a digital tracer, embedding a signature that would identify the destination once the file was opened. When she returned upstairs, he was already in the library again, pretending to read. Her voice drifted in from the hallway. You still awake? He looked up from the book. Just winding down. She stepped in, wrapped in silk and calm. You've been distant lately. Work, he said. She touched his shoulder, leaned close enough for him to smell the faint citrus on her skin. Don't let your mind ruin good things, she murmured. He forced a small smile. Wouldn't dream of it. When she left, he stayed where he was until her footsteps disappeared down the corridor. Then he exhaled. The trap was set. The next morning brought movement, fast, quiet, deliberate. At dawn, the security feed logged another burst of outbound traffic from Vanessa's devices. Ethan sat at his desk watching the data route light up. The tracer followed it cleanly this time, leading straight to a corporate server belonging to a rival tech firm, a company that had bid against him months ago. He stared at the logo on the screen, realization washing through him like cold water. She wasn't just betraying him, she was selling his work. His company. His name. He sent a silent copy of the trace to his private investigator's encrypted line, then shut down the terminal. When he turned, Zara was standing at the door again, dressed for school but watching him the way people watch fires from a distance. "It worked," she said softly. He nodded. "It worked. What will you do now?" "Expose her." "But not yet. Tonight." The girl shifted her weight, uncertain. "She'll be angry." "She'll be finished," he said. She hugged her notebook to her chest. "Can I help?" "You already did," he told her. "You saw what I didn't want to see." She hesitated before asking, "Will she go to jail?" "Probably." Zara looked down. "I don't like when people disappear." He crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Sometimes bad people need to. So others can breathe again." She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw trust there, small, cautious, real. That evening, preparations for the dinner began. Caterers moved through the halls, arranging candles and glassware. Laughter returned to the house, thin and brittle, carried by guests who knew only the surface of luxury. Vanessa shone in the middle of it, radiant in silver, her hand always finding Ethan's arm, her voice a practiced melody. He played along. Toasts. Smiles. The perfect host. In the control room, a second device recorded every word. By the time the last course was served, tension had threaded the air so tightly it hummed. Ethan could feel Zara's eyes watching from the staircase, half hidden behind the railing. Everything was ready. When Vanessa leaned close to whisper something about his mysterious new project, he simply smiled. "You'll see it soon." She didn't notice the meaning behind his words, but Zara did. The girl slipped quietly away toward the library, where a tablet displayed the live feed from the hidden cameras he'd installed that morning. The plan was in motion. Ethan lifted his glass for another toast. "To honesty," he said. Guests laughed politely, clinking crystal, unaware of the truth curving under his words. Vanessa smiled wider than all of them, her hand still resting over his. And upstairs, in the quiet glow of the monitor, Zara whispered to herself, "It's starting." The night of the dinner unfolded like a performance staged to perfection. Strings of soft music drifted through the great room, candles gleamed against the tall windows, and the sea outside shimmered in the distance like a curtain of black glass. Guests laughed in the background, lawyers, investors, two local officials, people who made careers out of polished small talk. Ethan stood at the center of it all, tailored, composed, a man playing himself. Vanessa moved beside him, glittering under the chandeliers, every step a statement of control. Her laughter came easily, her hand brushed his arm often, and her gaze flickered toward him whenever someone mentioned trust, partnership, or loyalty. She seemed to enjoy the irony. He smiled when he was supposed to, nodded at every compliment, but beneath the calm, his pulse kept a slow, deliberate rhythm. The trap was ready. At the edge of the balcony above, hidden behind the carved railings, Zara watched everything. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a tablet glowing faintly beside her. Through the connected feed, she could see every camera angle in the house, the kitchen, the study, the security room, the dining area. The screen showed the mirrored images of laughter, wine, and secrets wrapped in expensive light. Downstairs, dinner began. The guests gathered around the table. Silverware clinked gently against porcelain. The sound of the ocean rolled beneath the music. Vanessa raised her glass. "To love," she said. "To vision. And to the courage to share both." Everyone lifted their glasses. Ethan did too, though his hand didn't shake from emotion this time, only purpose. They drank. Smiled. 8. Halfway through the meal, conversation turned to the upcoming software launch. One of the investors leaned forward. "We've heard rumors, Ethan, something groundbreaking?" Ethan smiled, as if flattered by the curiosity. "Maybe. Depends on how you define groundbreaking." Vanessa laughed lightly. "He's being modest. It's revolutionary." He turned to her. "You've seen it?" "Only glimpses." Her tone was smooth, practiced. "Enough to know it'll change everything." He held her gaze. "Funny, I don't remember showing you." The laughter around the table dimmed slightly, a ripple of unease masked as polite confusion. Vanessa's expression didn't falter. "You talk in your sleep, darling," she said playfully. "I listen." He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "You always have." Upstairs, Zara watched the scene unfold, her small fingers tapping nervously against the tablet. The feed flickered briefly, then stabilized. She whispered to herself, "Almost there." Back downstairs, Ethan rose from his seat, glass in hand. "Since we're talking about innovation," he said, his voice calm but carrying, "I'd like to show you something special. Consider it a preview." Vanessa's hand paused mid-reach for her wine. "A preview?" He nodded toward the far wall. "Yes. Something I've been working on privately, a demonstration of honesty in design." He pressed a small remote in his pocket. The lights dimmed. The massive wall screen behind the dining table came to life, its surface filling with moving color. At first, it showed architectural renderings, the kind of harmless graphics one might expect at such an event. The guests murmured appreciatively. Then the feed changed. The image flickered once, then displayed a still frame, Vanessa in the kitchen, late at night, holding the small brown vial. The room went silent. Only the faint crackle of the fireplace filled the pause. Vanessa froze. "What is this?" Ethan didn't answer. The video continued, her pouring the contents into a glass, stirring, checking her phone. Her recorded voice echoed through the speakers, "He doesn't suspect yet. Once I have the passkey, we can move." One of the guests gasped softly. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan finally spoke, his voice even. "That's what you were doing, isn't it? Moving." Vanessa pushed back her chair, her face pale but controlled. "This is absurd. You're twisting things. That's old footage, edited. Who would even?" He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "The devices hidden around the house weren't edited. Neither were the calls traced to the company that outbid us last quarter." Her voice cracked just slightly before recovering. "You think I'm stupid enough to?" "Yes," he interrupted quietly. "Because you believed you'd already won." The air tightened. Guests glanced between them, unsure whether to stand or stay seated. The quiet power of money couldn't disguise the intimacy of betrayal on display. Vanessa straightened. "You're humiliating yourself." "Am I?" He clicked the remote again. The next clip appeared, a call log, her encrypted messages, voice confirmations. Every piece lined up cleanly, impossibly. The final message filled the screen in text form. "Deliver full access by tomorrow night. Payment confirmed." For a long moment, she said nothing. The light from the screen caught the shimmer of tears she refused to let fall. Then she laughed softly, bitterly. "You think this makes you righteous? You spied on me. You hid microphones in my house," he cut in. "You drugged me. You tried to sell what we built." Her silence was the only confession he needed. From the staircase above, Zara watched her eyes flick upward, a flicker of recognition. Vanessa saw the girl. Just for a heartbeat. The smile that crossed her face was small, sharp, dangerous. "You," she said under her breath, barely audible but clear enough. "You've been helping him." Zara stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. Ethan's gaze followed Vanessa's. He caught the glance, turned, and saw the girl framed in shadow at the top of the stairs. The moment stretched. Vanessa's voice rose, breaking the spell. "You brought her into this? The charity child?" She laughed once, harshly. "Perfect. The billionaire and his little witness." He didn't flinch. "She told the truth." "Truth?" Vanessa's voice cracked into something cold. "You're pathetic." Her mask finally broke, not with shouting, but with quiet fury. "You always wanted to be the hero. The savior. You needed someone to save so you could feel pure again." "Maybe," he said. "But at least I can still tell right from wrong." For a second, no one moved. Then a knock echoed from the front entrance, firm, timed. Ethan didn't need to answer, he'd arranged everything hours earlier. The door opened, and two plainclothes agents stepped inside, badges flashing subtly in the dim light. Vanessa turned, eyes wide, voice trembling with disbelief. "You called the police?" "Corporate Crimes Division," Ethan said quietly. "They've been following the same data trail I traced." One of the agents stepped forward. "Vanessa Cole, you're under investigation for industrial espionage, attempted poisoning, and breach of data confidentiality." Her breath caught, not from guilt, but from the realization that her world had ended in front of witnesses who mattered. She turned back to Ethan, fury and disbelief mixing behind her eyes. "You'll regret this," she whispered. He shook his head. "No. I'll finally sleep." They led her toward the door. As she passed the staircase, she stopped just long enough to look up at Zara again. "This isn't over," she said softly. The girl didn't look away. "It already is." Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing else. The front door closed behind her, the sound final as thunder in the stillness that followed. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the guests began to rise, murmuring excuses, retreating from the weight of someone else's downfall. Within minutes, the room was empty except for Ethan and the girl. He sank into a chair, the adrenaline leaving him slow and heavy. The only sound left was the faint ticking of the clock. Zara descended the stairs quietly, her small figure moving through the fading light. She stopped beside him. "You okay?" He looked up at her. "You shouldn't have had to see that." "I wanted to," she said. "People don't believe you until they see it." He nodded slowly, the truth of that settling deep. "You were brave." She shrugged. "I just whispered." He managed a small smile. "Sometimes that's all it takes." She looked toward the door where Vanessa had disappeared. "What happens now?" "Now?" He exhaled. "We start again." They stood in silence for a while, the ocean murmuring beyond the glass. Outside, police lights faded down the winding road until only darkness remained. Inside, the mansion felt both emptier and lighter. The air that had been too clean now felt breathable. The quiet no longer sounded like a trap, it sounded like peace trying to return. Ethan poured himself a glass of water, handed one to the girl. She accepted it without hesitation. They clinked glasses. Not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. "To truth," he said. She nodded. "To listening." The morning after the storm, the mansion woke to stillness. No police. No guests. No laughter echoing down the halls. Only the sea, steady and gray, moving against the cliffs like it had before all of this began. Ethan sat at the kitchen table alone. The same table where it had all started, the sunlight on the marble, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ring of a glass. Only this time, the juice was gone. Just coffee, strong and black. He watched the steam curl upward, slow and deliberate, and realized how strange it felt to sit without looking over his shoulder. For the first time in months, maybe years, the quiet wasn't heavy. Zara padded in from the hallway, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, eyes still a little sleepy. She slid into the seat across from him without a word. "Hungry?" he asked. She nodded. "Kinda." He stood, cracked eggs into a pan, the sound of sizzling filling the kitchen. The simple act, cooking, felt new, unfamiliar. No staff, no schedule. Just the rhythm of ordinary life returning in fragments. The girl watched him in silence for a while. Did they take her to jail? He nodded slowly. They're asking questions. There'll be hearings. Trials. All that comes next. She looked down at the table. She looked different when they took her. How? Like she'd forgotten how to pretend. He paused, the spatula in his hand. That line sat with him. Then he smiled faintly. Maybe that's what truth does to people. He served her a plate, poured milk into a glass, not juice, and sat back down. They ate quietly. The house felt less like a stage now, more like a home learning to exhale. When they finished, Zara reached for her notebook, flipping to a new page. "Can I draw you?" she asked. He blinked, surprised. "Why?" "Because you look different too." He smiled, shaking his head but not refusing. "Go ahead." She studied him, pencil moving in small, deliberate strokes. "You don't look scared anymore," she said. "Just tired." "That's close enough," he said softly. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sun rose higher, casting patterns across the floor. When she finished, she turned the sketchbook toward him. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Lines of shadow under his eyes, the slight curve of a smile that didn't quite know what to do with itself. He looked at the drawing for a long time. "You have a good eye," he said. "I just draw what's there." He nodded. "That's harder than it sounds." The day moved slowly. Calls came in from lawyers, journalists, former colleagues, people wanting statements, clarity, access. He ignored most of them. For the first time, there was no need to explain himself. The evidence spoke louder than he ever could. In the afternoon, he walked with Zara down the long path behind the mansion. The garden had started to bloom again after weeks of neglect. Salt wind moved through the hedges, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and ocean. They stopped by the fountain. The water glimmered in the sunlight, rippling softly with each gust of breeze. She watched the reflection, then looked up at him. "Are you going to sell this place?" He considered it. "Maybe. It feels like it belongs to someone else now." "Where will you go?" "I haven't decided." "You could come to our school," she said. "We have art days." He laughed quietly. "I don't think I'd fit in." "You could build things instead," she offered. "You're good at building." He looked down at her. "You really think so?" She nodded. "You fixed what was broken." "That's building." He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't. They sat on the stone edge of the fountain, sunlight brushing over them. For a moment, time folded in on itself, and all that was left was calm. Later, back inside, he opened his laptop. Not to check emails or reports, but to sign something he'd prepared the night before. A new document, simple and unadorned, a full scholarship grant to the private academy Zara's foster program was partnered with. Her name at the top, his digital signature at the bottom. He hesitated before sending it. "You like to draw, right?" he asked. She looked up from her notebook. "Yeah." "Good. Because you'll have time to learn properly." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned the screen so she could see the document. Her eyes moved across the text, lips parting slightly as she understood. "I don't want your money," she said quickly, uncomfortable. "It's not money," he said. It's a chance. She stared at him, uncertain. Why? Because you listened when no one else would. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she nodded, slow and solemn. Okay. He closed the laptop, relief settling over him like warmth after a long cold night. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the sound of waves through the open balcony door. That evening, they ate dinner together again, simple food, no guests, no music. When they finished, he poured 2 glasses of juice from a fresh bottle. Orange, bright under the light. He set one in front of her, one for himself. Her eyes widened a little. You're not scared? He smiled. Not anymore. She hesitated, then smiled back. You first. He lifted his glass, took a small sip, and set it down again. See? Nothing to fear. She did the same, then grinned. Tastes like oranges this time. He chuckled quietly. It's supposed to. They sat there in silence for a while. The sky outside shifted from gold to violet, and the house began to hum softly as night lights flickered on. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the last glow of daylight fading over the ocean. She spoke first. Why didn't you believe me the first time? He thought about it. Because sometimes the truth whispers, and people like me only listen when it starts to scream. She nodded, understanding something deeper than her age should have allowed. At least you listened. He looked at her then, really looked, and realized that in a world built on noise, she had been the only one who'd heard what mattered. Thank you, he said quietly. She shrugged. I just didn't want you to drink it. He smiled at that, a small, real smile that reached all the way to his eyes. As night folded around the mansion, the two of them stayed at the table long after the plates were cleared, talking about small things, her school, his travels, the kind of skies she liked to draw. The conversation flowed easily now, without weight or shadows. When she finally grew tired, he walked her to the guest room door. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow will be better. She turned back, her voice barely above a whisper. It already is. He watched her disappear inside, then stood there a moment longer. The corridor stretched before him, silent and empty, yet for the first time, he didn't feel alone. He went back to the kitchen, rinsed the glasses, and looked out at the dark sea. The reflection of the house lights shimmered across the water like pieces of broken gold. He whispered to himself, not out of habit but gratitude. Sometimes truth doesn't roar, he said softly. It whispers, and if you're lucky, you listen. 6 months passed. Summer had returned to the coast, and with it, a softer kind of light, the kind that lingered on waves and left salt in the air. The mansion no longer belonged to Ethan. He had sold it quietly, without announcement or nostalgia, leaving behind glass, marble, and too many echoes. He lived in a smaller place now, closer to the city, a restored townhouse with old wooden floors that creaked in the mornings, and windows that opened to real noise, laughter, traffic, life. He liked it that way. The quiet here was different, it didn't hide anything. On his desk sat a framed drawing, Zara's sketch of him from that morning in the kitchen. The lines were still rough, the pencil faintly smudged, but the eyes were alive. She'd captured something he hadn't seen in himself until then, the fragile piece of someone learning to start over. He looked at it often. It reminded him to listen. That afternoon, he drove to the community center on the south side of town, the one his new foundation had helped rebuild. Children spilled out into the courtyard, chalk drawings covering the concrete in swirls of color. He parked and stepped out, the wind catching his jacket, carrying the distant scent of roasted corn from a street vendor nearby. Inside the center, laughter echoed off the bright walls. A group of kids sat around a table scattered with sketchbooks and tablets. At the far end of the room, Zara stood, older somehow even in those few months. Her hair neater, her voice steadier. She was showing another girl how to use a design app, her gestures animated, her focus absolute. When she noticed him standing by the doorway, she smiled, small, genuine, the kind of smile that carried recognition but no dependence. "You came," she said. "I promised, didn't I?" She nodded toward the younger kids. "They think I'm famous because you built all this." He laughed softly. "They're wrong. You built this. I just paid the bills." She rolled her eyes, but the corners of her mouth lifted. "That's not how it works." "Maybe it should be," he said. They walked together down the corridor lined with murals, children's hands painted in bright colors, shapes of hearts, trees, suns. In one corner, a small plaque bore her name beneath the words Art and Innovation Wing, in honor of Zara Akinyi, who chose to listen. She stopped when she saw it. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that. I wanted it to surprise you." She stared at the plaque for a long time, then looked up at him. "You make it sound like I did something huge." "You did," he said. "You changed everything." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled again and shrugged, a little shy now. "So what about you? You still building things?" "Trying to," he said. "Smaller things this time. Ones that help instead of sell." "Good," she said. "The world has enough big things already." They went outside again, standing in the late afternoon sun. Children ran past, chasing each other, their laughter filling the space between words. He watched them for a moment, hands in his pockets. "Do you miss the ocean?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "But I like it here better. There's noise. It feels alive." He nodded. "That's how I feel too." A breeze moved through the courtyard, carrying dust and laughter. She looked up at him. "You still listen for whispers?" "Every day," he said. She grinned. "Then you're safe." He laughed quietly at that, then looked toward the horizon where the sun dipped low over the rooftops. "You know," he said after a moment, "I never thanked you properly." "You already did," she said. "You believed me." That was enough. They stood there for a while, watching the sky fade from gold to orange to the deep blue of evening. The city hummed around them, cars, voices, music from a distant radio, a chorus of life still going on. When the first streetlights flickered on, she said, "I should lock up." He nodded. "I'll walk you out." As they reached the gate, she turned one last time to the building, to the plaque shining faintly in the dusk. "Do you think people will remember?" He smiled. "Maybe not the way it happened. But they'll feel it. That's enough." She looked at him then, eyes bright with the kind of understanding words can't hold. "Good night," she said. "Good night," he replied. She walked away toward the waiting van. He watched until it turned the corner and disappeared into the slow rhythm of the evening. Then he stood there alone for a moment longer, breathing in the sound of the city, its noise, its truth, its living proof that quiet can heal too. He reached into his coat pocket and found the old house key he still carried out of habit. He turned it over once, then dropped it into a donation box by the door. Letting go, finally. The wind lifted again, soft, carrying a sound that might have been a child's laugh or a whisper. Either way, he smiled. Sometimes truth didn't need to roar. It just needed someone to hear it.